Hey guys, it's Skybird, and this video is about something other than this. Well, it is about Bionicle weapons, but not this one specifically. However, the reason I'm showing you this one first, because this weapon irritates me to no end. Before I get into the actual meat of the video, I'm going to ruin this one for you. Okay, so this weapon is interesting. It was introduced all the way back in 2008 on a few sets, but notably the set that it came with attached its hand to this axle right here. And one of the unique things about this weapon, in fact, is the fact that it has multiple axles. It's not the only weapon to feature that, but very few do, and this is one of them, so it's worth mentioning it where it happens. However, when you attach something to those axles, like this one here, and say you attach something to the other axle here as well, oh no, you can start to see that there's a problem, right? That gap is getting bigger, and that's because those axles do not align. They're close enough that you could definitely bend the pieces together and, attach something between them to sort of bridge the gap, so to speak. But that actually also applies to the pins as well. These pins here and the axle itself are actually sort of tilted up just slightly, a handful of degrees at most. And it just bothers me. That's all. It still functions. It does everything it needs to do. It just bothers me a tiny bit, and that was worth mentioning. Oh, right. So what are the weapons I want to focus on today? Well, in 2006, Bionicle did something controversial. It got rid of functions from its canister sets. And I believe one way to make up for this was introducing a set of weapons that were kind of unique, never really seen before or since in Bionicle, honestly. And although they definitely had some nods to some previous weapons, notably the weapons from the Vaki, the Piraka weapons, which this video is about, I think do what the Vaki weapons tried to do, but better. First off, many of them are still staff-like weapons, notably this one right here, and many of them feature double-sided tools, a tool on one side of a weapon or another. But one of the reasons I think these weapons succeed where the Vaki weapons, in my opinion, succeed less, let's say, and to each their own, right? One of the reasons that I think these weapons do well is because of A, the way they attach to, B, the limb they attach to, and C, how those two things sort of interact, right? So, for one thing, though many of the weapons attach via an axle coming directly out of the weapon rather than parallel the weapon like these ones do here, some of the weapons actually do have the axle parallel as well, which leads to some pretty interesting connections because it allows you to sort of pick and choose between weapons for whatever build you're trying to do. If you need the axle to be facing one direction, you have an option. If you need the axle to be facing another, you have an option. And it's also worth noting too that there are various different shapes and sizes of these weapons too. And I appreciate that. They're not all trying to do or be the same thing, but all are capable of utilizing this limb, the Piraka limb. Unique from Bionicle, unique from Lego, in fact, in the fact that it has a ball joint that is a type B style. I don't know what else to call it, but a style that allows for the socket to go all the way through. And in fact, is so unique, this socket can go a full 360 degrees around that ball joint. That's actually pretty incredible. No other limb can do that from Bionicle. And it allows you to do things like this, to actually swap weapons on a dime. It's really nice. You don't have to disconnect the weapon and flip it around, but that is an option for you. If you want the weapon to face the other direction, you can do that, right? Some of the weapons are even able to take some advantage of the fact that there is a gap here by allowing the weapon to actually go through that gap, like this hook from the Vizo set, right? Now, on its own, this one is one that kind of bothers me a little bit, at least at first, because that hook does not have a lot of range on it, right? That's not a very intimidating weapon if that's as far as it can go. But that leads me to my next topic. Hidden connections. And I'm only going to spoil a couple of them, notably because I think that there are a lot of hidden connections revolving around these pieces in general. But one of them that I found just incredibly satisfying involved this piece. So this piece has this sort of gap inside of here, inside of this sort of saw blade, very reminiscent of the Borak shield, and we'll get back to that in a moment. But that gap just so happens to be the exact same size as a Coley puck. And I'm not going to call it a Coley ball. It's not a ball. But it is the same size that, allowing you to actually connect this. And in fact, connect it with just enough room that if you want to use that axle still, you can. So that is pretty damn incredible, if I may say so myself. But going back for a moment to that design. It is also worth noting that many of the Piraka weapons have nods to previous weapons that came before, not only from the early 2000s, but really all the way up through until the Piraka weapons came out. Notably, this sort of arrow design right here shows up on a couple of weapons. It shows up on the Nokama Metru weapon, for example, this little thing right here. Obviously here it's used on a harpoon, so it's kind of cool to see a water weapon having nods to another water weapon. Or you have weapons like these right here, which both contain nods to the Staff of Light, a very prevalent, very popular thing that you'll see a lot of in these Piraka weapons as well. And going back to not only nods to other weapons, but other hidden features, this one right here contains another, because the Piraka also introduced the Zammer Sphere, their projectile. And it just so happens that that projectile can fit inside of these hooks right here. I'm making that look like it's probably more difficult than it is, but it actually works out really well. And you could even think of this as like sort of siphoning the energy from that and maybe blasting it out the backside, which, by the way, leads me to my next thing, and then we'll come back to the hooks. If you own this weapon, but you don't own the set it came from, you might not know this, but this weapon can also hold a bar-sized item in the front. In the Hakan set, it comes with a red lightsaber that it shoots out the front side. Well, I shouldn't say shoots out. It's not a projectile, but, you know, it's made to look like it's shooting a laser, and that's cool. But you can obviously attach whatever you want there. A spear to the front of this, a sword to the front of it would look kind of cool as well. And going back to these hooks for a moment, they're actually reminiscent of a couple of things, because notably, it is the exact same hook, or nearly the exact same hook, from this Vaki weapon right here. But it's also notably the same hook as from Gali from 2001. It is the front half of her hook-shaped weapon. Another weapon that gets a nod from an air character, these two right here, both of which, well, this one Vaki, this one Piraka, similar size too, which I think is honestly kind of great. And yeah, overall, these are some really interesting weapons, but they did come out during a controversial time for LEGO for Bionicle. One, because this was the year that cut off functions, that canceled functions. They had to kind of do something to make up for it, right? Having these weapons flip around was a really good nod, but these weapons are, for the most part, exclusive to these sets as well. Obviously, you have Ernak as well, but I'm going to consider that a combination. But even though they're exclusive, they do, some of them, come in multiple colors. It's sort of, your mileage may vary on this and how you want to define it, but as you know, with 2006, one of the other controversial things it did was it introduced a new shade of silver, of gold, and even of gunmetal, though a little less notable here. It introduces Pearl Light Gray, and this is the color that comes out to replace the classic silver. But in so doing, in doing this in 2006, it meant that some of these came in that classic silver as well. In fact, I have both, though I don't have them in front of the camera here, so I'm not going to be showing them. You'll have to take my word for it, and I have posted pictures on the Discord previously. That said, it's also worth noting that gunmetal saw this as well. 2006, as far as I know, is the first year to introduce a color called titanium to LEGO, though it wasn't officially introduced to LEGO until, I believe, 2010 or maybe late 2009. It definitely was introduced in 2006 because I have pieces in both colors, various pieces, including one of Hakan's weapons in that color, as well as classic gunmetal like this one here. But even some hard plastic pieces like the Piraka body coming in both shades of gunmetal. The last color, notably from 2005, is Pearl Gold. Now, you're not going to see, as far as I'm aware, any flat gold pieces like the other two. How each of the other weapons can come in two shades, or at least some of them can come in two shades. Pearl Gold was swapped out in late 2005 before these weapons were being produced. So unfortunately, unless there are prototypes out there, these are not hitting the market in flat gold. You know, not the end of the world, but it would have been kind of cool to have seen those in both colors too, especially like the body or the claws, whatever the case may be. I'm getting ahead of myself. Piraka weapons. Definitely really interesting weapons from Bionicle's history, very unique weapons for Bionicle's history, and honestly, kind of the last time we'd really see something with this design philosophy from Bionicle, with this sort of switch back and forth type weapon. After that point, most of the weapons from Bionicle were sort of functional as a one-sided weapon, but they are not the last of the Piraka weapons, which It might be a little baffling. I say this because I have some sort of honorary mentions, some that in my mind sort of fulfill the same role that Piraka weapons did, but they're not from the Piraka. They're not even from Bionicle. They're from Hero Factory, and they're these weapons right here. I'm going to try and showcase all three as best I can here at once. These are some really interesting weapons because these also, function with the Piraka limb to do whatever you really want them to do, and many other weapons do, so that's not the only reason I would consider them, but they sort of have the same design philosophy as a lot of the Piraka weapons. Like, clearly the design language here is different. The greebling is a lot smaller, a lot more detailed, closer together, and this is even a different plastic material, I don't know what, but it is able to still do what the Piraka weapons do, and I really appreciate that. One of them is entirely a blaster, which is kind of cool, so you can actually use this as like a gun, as a whatever you want it to be, or as a hook if you want to use the underside of it. You can combine two of them together if you want. And notably with this one, it can connect a bar to the front as well, or a spear to the front, but it can also connect this over top as well. So you get a little extra use out of it. You get that multi-metallic stack of colors, which is cool looking either way. Overall, the Piraka weapons are a lot of fun. I do think you should go out of your way to kind of experiment with them and play around with them further. One of the other things that I found that kind of works, but not quite as well, is with the Dragon Cores from Hero Factory. Not Hero Factory, Ninjago can also fit in here, but only if you have like a socket or something else in here to hold it in place. Otherwise, it just falls out because the diameter is slightly smaller, which means, unfortunately, no, this cannot work with this unless you squeeze these together, which you probably could do with rubber bands in time. Just let it kind of curl and, fix itself to that point. All right, so that's going to be it for the video. If you enjoyed the video, be sure to subscribe. It really helps the channel out. I'm still continuing to get better illness-wise. I'm hoping that this year just flies by and I'm healthy in 2025. Anyway, that's it. See ya. Bye.